Hey guys, King's Exotics 101 here today, and today I'm going to be doing a video on my personal favorite reptile that I own, and why that species is my favorite. In case you guys couldn't tell from One Eye Willie being in front of you, my favorite species of reptile that I currently own is the bearded dragon. I think bearded dragons are great. They have great qualities that make them very friendly, very affordable, they're relatively easy to find. A lot of people have them, so I'm going to go over some of the advantages and disadvantages of owning bearded dragons. So let's go ahead and get started. So before I even consider buying a certain species of reptile, there are three things that I like to look at. One, the reptile's price. Two, the reptile's availability. And three, the reptile's handability. Let's start off with price. Bearded dragons go for about $75 for a baby and about $100 or more for adults. You can find babies with nipped tails, missing toes, or small inconveniences like that can bring the price down nearly 50%, which is really cool. I actually got this guy for $5 because I adopted him and no one wanted him anymore because of his one eye. Next, we got to talk about the availability. These guys are available pretty much anywhere. You can go to any pet store, including PetSmart, Petco, although I would not advise buying things there. They're always going to be there. I have like 3 local pet stores around me. All of them carry baby bearded dragons, and one of them carries adult bearded dragons for breeding. And then the last thing to look at is their handability. One thing that really makes people love bearded dragons is their easy accessibility to be handled. They don't put up a big fuss when you want to take them out of the cage. They handle very well. This is one of the only animals that you can grab, put them on your shoulder, or put them like near you, and they'll just stay on your hand for an hour without complaining. One thing that I do want to note is when you do hold a bearded dragon, I learned from people who had been doing the reptile hobby before me, always support all 4 of their legs. That's how they feel like they're like being the most supported and that they're not going to fall. That's how they don't like stress out or move around constantly. They're really easy to grab out of the cage, not very bitey as long as you hold them and feed them as often as they should be. So speaking of feeding, let's go ahead and move on to the topic of feeding. Alright, so when it comes to feeding bearded dragons, the feeding is relatively easy, to be honest. Compared to other reptiles, they don't need every other day feeding. They do need at least a weekly feeding and some small supplements in between. Every week I give all my bearded dragons 1 to 2 dozen large crickets, depending on the size. My juveniles get 1 dozen or about a dozen and a half, and my adults always get 2 dozen. The crickets are always dusted with non-D3 calcium. Occasionally they get dusted with D3 calcium, but not usually. I always give my bearded dragons about a dozen superworms throughout the week. Like I said, you're fine on a once-a-week diet, but I like to increase their amount of supplements that they receive throughout the week. Romaine lettuce is another big thing I feed mine, and there's also some pellet food that I would highly recommend. Excuse the voice crack. I'll put them inside of the cage right now just so you guys can see the examples while I have it focused on there. But these are actually 2 of my favorite kinds of bearded dragon food. The Zilla fortified bearded dragon food. I think this one's amazing. This running low a little bit. I've had this one for about 6 months now. Still going strong. And then this is my personal favorite. This is the ones that my bearded dragons favor the most too. They always go for it. It contains different... each pellet, each color represents something different. I find that my bearded dragons love the red ones. That's why I buy this, because it's red, and I think they're made out of the same materials. Yeah, Reptile and Zilla, 2 very, very good places to buy your bearded dragon food. So now we're going to talk about housing, and that's pretty much. So when it comes to housing bearded dragons, it's relatively easy. When I say housing, I don't just mean the tank size. I also mean lighting, basking spot, reptile, water, and food bowl, and like substrate. I keep most of my bearded dragons inside of 20-gallon long containers. Or not containers, excuse me, tanks. But for One Eye Willie, like I said, he does have a disability. It's easier for him to be inside of this style of enclosure. He's inside of an Exoterra, one of the easy open ones. I believe it's called the long medium. I'm not sure on the exact dimensions. But he has a nice, these are my favorite types of bearded dragon hide, because even when they reach adulthood, they can always fit underneath that hole there to go down there if they want to cool off. And the hide is always big enough for a bearded dragon to climb on top. Speaking of heating and basking, our preferred bulb is this one. I'm not sure, I think it's a Zilla one, but what's interesting about it is it has a UV bulb, that big one, and then it has a heat bulb, which is the halogen. And in case you guys don't know, halogens are much cheaper and much more efficient when it comes to heating your bearded dragon cages. Of course, I turn it off at night. I just leave it on for about 12 hours each day. When it comes to substrate for my bearded dragon, I use something that I don't see a lot of people using. This is called Critter Country. I use it for a variety of reasons. One is because it absorbs moisture very well, so it doesn't let all the water that I spill whenever, what he spills, go down to the bottom of the tank. It absorbs it. And two, it holds stink very well, so if I've gone on a vacation for the weekend or something like that, and he takes a poop, it'll absorb most of the smell, and when I come back, my house is not going to be smelling disgusting. And my favorite reason for using this substrate is because the bearded dragons can actually digest it and eat it without any problem. Compared to other substrates such as sand, some people use paper towels and all that. I don't like using paper towels because, one, they don't look good, and you have to change them much more often. This does need to be changed probably once every 2 to 3 months. But like I was saying, with it being ingestible, if a bearded dragon eats this, they're basically just eating like a crushed-up form of lettuce. There's actually a bearded dragon food out there that literally contains this guy's substrate in it. It's part of their diet, so no harm done. This guy does have some reptile chips sprinkled in. I only did that because, one, the reptile chips were in there when he, we're in there with the previous animal that was in this tank, and two, because he has some trouble shedding, as you guys can kind of see on the back, and reptile chips hold in and release more of the moisture, whereas the Critter Country substrate holds in the moisture but doesn't release it in the form of humidity, so it helps this guy shed. So yeah, that's pretty much everything about their tank. Food and water bowls, like I say, I've said this in previous videos, I would always recommend buying a hamster bowl for a water bowl or food bowl because they're really cheap. They're like $1.99 for that big ceramic one. The ceramic ones, the poop washes off the sides far easier than any of these kind. I would usually buy a hamster bowl for the food bowl, but since this guy only has one eye, it's kind of hard for him to raise his head over the raised edges of the water bowl. So I have to keep a low-lying food bowl, that way he can see the swarms and so they don't escape and roam the cage. Yeah, so bearded dragons, definitely one of the best, if not the best, lizards to start off with or to keep as an experienced keeper. I have multiple animals of multiple species, of multiple types, snakes, lizards, all that. My personal favorite, like I said in the beginning, has got to be bearded dragons. They just have amazing personalities. They're not going to freak out, except for my one, you guys see inside of the reptile room tour, always freaks out. But they are always very handleable, except for that one. The only thing that I don't like about bearded dragons is they're very susceptible to attacking each other. Meaning if you did produce a clutch of them, you can only keep the babies together for a short period of time, like a week, 2 weeks tops. And they lay 30 babies, so getting rid of the babies is going to be hard because I'm actually planning on breeding bearded dragons. And that's actually how I think that this guy lost his eye, because I've said this inside my reptile room tour, but he has a missing eye, obviously, hence the name One-Eyed Willie. I think he lost his eye due to a conflict when he was younger. Of course, it impairs his vision, but other than that, he's a completely healthy specimen. So, yeah, bearded dragons, great animal. Like and subscribe on the video and comment what other animals you want me to do. Just really quickly, I know I just kind of unofficially ended the video, but this is the 20-gallon long tanks that I was talking about. Very similar setup, as you guys can see. I have a hamster bowl and a hamster water bowl for his food and water bowl because, like I said, he needs a low-lying bowl, but usually I would go with those. Same thing, like I said, always use those logs so they can go under there. That's actually an adult female. The only difference between my 20-gallon tanks is most of them have 2 different bulbs, one for UV and one for heat. They don't have the dual system, which is kind of inconvenient. However, it's not that big of a deal considering that I've been dealing with it for years now. But yeah, thanks. I'm going to officially end the video right now. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe.